Yep. Okay, we'll call the Thames Community Board back into session. And we'll ask 2.5 as an agenda item. And we'll invite Rosalind Ward, please, to explain all to us. You can go up to
Good afternoon, members.
Yep.
This report is the Thames Partnership Grant Recipients Performance Report for 2023-24. It is item 2.5 on the agenda today. This is a for your information report from 2021-22 to 2023-24. There were funding agreements in place for the recipients for this funding. The purpose of this report is to provide the performance report for these Thames Local Partnership Grant recipients for the year 2023-2024. The recipients are listed in the table in the report and also in attachment A. There were 13 recipients in total, including the four halls. 11 achieved the requirements for the year, 1 didn't, and 1 was a group that had its facility under renovation for the year, which meant it wasn't open for the majority of the year. Are there any questions?
Councillor Rebel.
I would just like to a comment that will lead into a question, but on page 89 with the Tapu Domain Flat Hall and Community Trust, I had the opportunity to attend a meeting of that trust, and I was incredibly impressed with the enthusiasm that the volunteers who are on that trust had for what they are doing, and the fact that they have just put in a brand new kitchen, which looks sensational, and I think that's a really significant achievement. However, what did come out was a number of questions that they had, and it would seem to me that they need to engage more strongly with council staff around some of the things that they are raising, and I'm just wondering whether there is a plan in place for staff to be to meet with them.
Through the chair, I have met with the Tapu Hall committee this year, and depending on what the matter is that they are raising, the lease advisor also meets with them on a regular basis. We intend to meet with the Hall committee together early next year, depending on the council response to a proposal for the halls and libraries that we will bring to the council in early 2025. In regard to general discussion and contact with the Tapu Hall committee, I have had quite a bit of contact with them this year, and they've given us a good report on their activities during the year.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Rodley.
Yes, could I also ask you a question about about number 4, Tapu Domain Flat Hall and Community Trust? Is it historical reasons that there's no lease in place?
There is no lease in place for Tapu Domain Flat Hall and Community Trust. The reason for that is unclear. Across the district, we have 10 halls that are owned by council, and only 3 of them have a lease in place. So this is an issue that became apparent during the process for preparing new community grants policies, which council resolved to do in December 2023, and we have been working on the draft policy this year. The draft document will be presented to the council in early 2025.
Just a follow-up question, as Councillor Revel pointed out, that the trust, it is a trust, isn't it? Yeah, have put significant efforts into renovating the kitchen. Without a lease, that puts them in a very not fantastic position if you've got no lease. So I think it's quite incredible that fantastic for the hall that the group has put a kitchen in, but they're possibly just doing it on faith alone that they're going to continue to be able to operate that hall.
That is correct. And it was an issue that came up during the workshops in June and July this year when staff visited the community boards.
My understanding is there's an expectation that they will end up with a lease that makes sense for them and for council.
Yes, and actually, I mean, with the one above it, Te Puru Community, the Te Puru Hall, we were at a function there last month, and one of the rooms was taken up with a whole lot of fresh kitchen cabinetry ready to be installed. So I suspect that Te Puru Hall possibly now has a completely new kitchen as well. So it's really cool to see the halls doing that sort of level of maintenance.
Anybody else got any questions, Roslyn? So can you just quickly explain to the board the benefits of a lease and the downside if they don't have one, please?
So the purpose of the report is not about the leases, it's about the grant funding, and grant funding for the 4 halls is for operational day-to-day running of the hall. The other recipients have funding for different reasons, different purposes, and if you're wanting to know about the lease versus non-lease, the matter became very evident when we started looking at all the halls and libraries to see who had a lease and who didn't. And as I had indicated, a proposal to address this is going to the council in early 2025.
My concern is that's the most amount of money we pay out is $12,000. So they have no lease with us. We give them $12,000. So what happens in the long term if we decide,
Yeah.
hey, we don't give them $12,000 and we have no lease, they just sink and swim?
In regard to the Tapu Domain Flat Hall and Community Trust, the funding that they receive per annum is historic, and the campground next door was set up to fund the operation of the hall many years ago. So the way I understand it is that a proportion of the income council gets from the lease at Tapu Campground goes to the hall committee. And that's an historic arrangement.
Councillor Sinclair?
Rose, I just wanted to say thank you for this level of oversight because I believe we were quite aware of what was outgoing in terms of who received grants last year, but we had no oversight at how they were doing on those grants. And so I really value this level of transparency for us. So it's not a question. Thank you.
Councillor Rodley?
So with the different colours, so green obviously is achieved, and we've got orange seems to be for not achieved, but then we've got the Heritage Trust being red. Is that like really not achieved? But I just wonder about the outcomes for the Coromandel Heritage Trust, because you've got have a digitised and catalogued collection. That just does seem like an interesting outcome because they do have a digitised and catalogued collection. Not all of their information is digitised and catalogued, but then there's the bottom one is a thriving organisation. It's valued and has strong community support. That seems to me a difficult one to say that something's not achieved. Yes, they've had to close the doors because of funding issues, but that doesn't mean that the organisation isn't valued and hasn't got strong community support. So it seems an interesting outcome to have, but the fact that we've rated it as a not achieved doesn't really sit comfortably with me. But, I guess that is what it is.
The outcomes were for a 3-year period, and the intent, the agreement was that in a 3-year period, the collection would be digitised, and they got to about 40%. In regard to a thriving organisation, the value proposition wasn't supported enough by the community, although they did put in a lot of effort, the Treasury, to raise awareness about the current situation, well, their situation at the time. They weren't able to have a strong enough value proposition for the community to support it so that it didn't close.
Yeah, I don't really know what a strong enough value proposition is, but I think just to label it as not achieved, basically saying, well, it's not valued and the community doesn't really care about it, I don't feel that's an adequate reflection. Just because the community doesn't go out and visit it and spend money there doesn't mean that it's not valued. Just my thought.
Any further questions? Board Member Raikwa.
Thanks, Chair. Regarding for lease, the council, some of the halls, they have no lease. I think it's worth it to look at or tidy up all halls with the lease if they're using it. Or also they're getting funding from there. So has to be someone have to responsible to use those wisely.
Thanks for your comment. Of the 4 halls, 2 are council owned, 1 has a lease. The Tapu Hall doesn't. The other 2 halls are privately owned in Thames. Across the district, it's different, yeah. So that's the 4 halls in summary for Thames.
So an earlier conversation with the area manager, we roll these over. How long have these sums been going on for now?
The current recipients have been receiving funding from the council for many years. Some of them are longer than others.
But at this level, is this, so they just roll it over without any thought about whether there's a need for it or no need for it? And my concern about not having a lease, I mean, that's a council owned hall. I presume the hall committee pays the insurance, or does the council pay the insurance if it burns down with the new kitchen?
The council pays the insurance and then claws back the funding. So this is where we get into that money go around that we've talked about previously, where the grant is paid. For example, the hall is leased, which is Te Puru. The insurance is paid by the council and then we ask them to pay us back the insurance funding. So it's money going around, so we pay it out and we get it back. So we're seeking to address that with the new approach that we will present early next year.
Councillor Sinclair?
Well, I think I can speak to it. And as you saw on page 87, I was in fact the mover of this motion when it came to council. The grants policies are all being reviewed, and the decision for this long-term plan was to roll over what had been previously and so on and so forth, because this piece of work is quite a big piece of work and requires quite a lot of work, and it just wasn't going to get done before the LTP. So that was a decision that council made. So yeah, the numbers, I think you could argue about every single one of them maybe being not fair, too much, too little, whatever. But the reality is for this period of the long-term plan, it is what it is. And then next time round of the long-term plan, we will hopefully definitely have a new grants policy and we'll be able to adjust these accordingly.
So this grant policy is in place for 10 years or 3?
3 years.
Yeah.
They reset it every
That
long-term.
reset, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
but
when
it's a 10, this is a 10-year plan
yes,
that
so
you've
in
just
2027,
put
when
in
we set
place.
the new long-term plan,
Yeah.
we will be able to set, based on the new grants policy, we will be able to set new funding for each of them.
That's what that was the case. And this is local rates.
Yes, correct. I believe so.
So it could be an interesting meeting tomorrow. At rates. Right. Oop. So No, please have a mover for that the Thames Community Board receives the Thames Partnership Grant Recipients Performance Report for 23-24, dated 7th of November 24. Moved by Councillor Revel, seconded by Board Member Rakwa. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, declared carried. 2.6 on the action schedule. Right. Thank you. Anybody got any comments on the action schedule, please? We've added some items onto this, haven't we, today? Or will be, I should say. Councillor Rodley?
So looking at number 4, footpath rehabilitation, members noted that paved areas and surround on the Pollen Mary Street intersection needed work. We've got that's completed, and I realise it's just the action. It's not, the work hasn't been completed, but it says no sites are to be considered. If specific areas are a matter of concern, an RFS could be raised, the area investigated and prioritised. No policy or funding to address the visual appearance of roading assets. So I just find it interesting that as a community board, we've raised this issue and we've been told by people issues around there with pavers around the trees being higher, there's slumping, doesn't look like it's been, I'd be interested to know how long since it had been water blasted because it still looks really quite grotty. We raised this, we're told nothing's being considered and about raising an RFS. Is that the correct use of the RFS system? Why would we as a board raise an RFS? We're the community board. We've identified this concern, but then we've been told there's no sites are going to be considered. Raise an RFS. Well, if we raise an RFS, and I'll say, well, no sites. What's the point? Why are we here? If this is the response that we have, and I'm not blaming staff for giving that response, but where do we go from here?
Actually, I think you got a very valid point there. But it's something we probably should talk about in our next network briefing meeting. It's just how we resolve this issue
I would be
with these.
happy to raise it.
Yeah, because that's a fairly simplistic answer to us. And it actually makes the town look really scruffy, particularly down the corner of Steely and Pollen Street Junction Hotel. Yep. That area, those bricks have been missing there for all this term that I've been here, and I've put in 2 requests for services down there, and the bricks are still missing.
Also, the bottom point talking about the replacing those the slippery tiles, which according to someone who knows these sorts of things shouldn't have been put in the first place, replace them with concrete pavers, and they're talking about $190,000 to $250,000 per junction. So that means something between 45 and 60,000 per corner to replace pavers. I mean, is it just me, or does that seem like a insane sum of money to put some pavers in? Is it? If it's just me, fine. If I'm completely out of touch, but it just seems.
You can see us after lunch, can't you?
Clearly, I get nothing.
I'll
raise this on a workshop, maybe.
No, but nobody's even
No, getting.
So the other thing on there is, of course, it's the heritage lights. Without keeping on going on about the heritage
If I'm
light.
not getting my pavers replaced, then you're not getting your lights replaced. I'm sorry, Ed.
No, you're right. We're not. Very good. But I was going to ask the area manager because she had something some comment to make about it.
So this action has been on the action schedule for some time, and I'd like to prevent us from going round and round in circles. The heritage lights were removed, the fittings were removed on the 13th of December 2023. They were old and they were removed because of electrical fault. They were electrically faulty and had been up since the late 1980s. So we think it's around about 35 years that they were there. The old light fittings aren't available to be put up again, and the roading manager would not recommend that happen anyway if we still had them. There is no budget in the LTP to purchase new light fittings, and so we're in a little bit of a predicament where if the board would really like to have new light fittings in the current budget, there is no funding. The funding required will include some portion from NZTA, and so a local rate would need to top up the to achieve the amount needed.
Deputy Chair.
So there are other, through the chair, there are other light fittings being replaced all the time around here. So it's not the total cost of new heritage light fittings that's required, is it? Because you can use the recently installed LEDs, use them on other poles. So it's the difference in cost that only has to be funded. So are you able to perhaps find out what that difference in cost would be for the however many light fittings there are in Grahamstown? In other words, the ones that are up the pole aren't, they're not dead ducks yet because they've only just gone in.
What was the last
I think
comment? Go what? Once at the poll?
Well, the LEDs that they put in December last year
Yeah.
are perfectly serviceable. They can just go on
Oh,
other
yeah.
poles.
Board Member Rakwa.
Thanks, Chair. Regarding for the light, if they're fit for purpose, just good to be just leave it as light. If they need to change, then we'll look for the upgrading something different design. So that's my comment on that. And also, footpath. They will jump into the next one, but footpath, it's not in good condition. Especially when they plant Puthkawa tree on the main street. Puthkawa tree look good, color good, but also they have the roots pops up and they lift the whole footpath up. So whatever who designed that thing, make sure they put the right plant that affect the footpath.
The horse is actually bolted. Anybody got any other questions? So, heritage lights in Grahamstown. They were installed by this community, by the community board. They were taken down without consulting the community board. Community board paid $30,000 for those lights without consulting them, and there are replacement heritage lights available. And I've sent all that information through to the roading manager. So I'm not too sure why. One thing about those LED lights, which is quite interesting, is previously on the other lights, the seagulls couldn't land on them. They can on the LED lights because they've got a wider base for their web feet. So we got quite a few seagulls sitting on them, if nothing else. But Grahamstown is known as a heritage precinct in Thames. It has the best collection of 19th century wooden shops in New Zealand, left in New Zealand. And we want to make it the heritage area. And to do that, you need the heritage lights back in place. So the poles are there. It's just a matter of changing the new, and they are LED lights. And Spunlight has those LED lights available. And I believe that we should have been consulted with them when they took them down. And secondly, they should be looking at somehow replacing them, taking them down, recycling the ones that put up there and put some new heritage lights up there. And that's my light, and I'll pursue it as long as I possibly can.
Through the chair, what our staff are saying is that the next opportunity is the next long-term plan to make a submission or to have a project in the long-term plan to purchase new light fittings that create the amenity value that we're looking for. So I hear your comment, and I'm just I think we need to agree on is the next step. So is the next step to wait until the next long-term plan and submit a project request, or do you want to do something outside that in the meantime? And the options that we really have in this board are discretionary budget, or if we had any retained earnings, we may be able to do something there, or tugpra.
So it's not an expensive exercise from my understanding from Spunlight, and my memory fades sometimes a bit, but I think it's around about 65,000 to actually replace the poles and the lights. The lights themselves are considerably cheaper than that. And depends on whether the poles are certified as being suitable to be left there for another 10 or 15 years. The thing is that the board was not consulted about those lights when they took them down on the 13th of December in the middle of the night. And that annoys me, lack of consultation over something which actually belonged to the Thames board. So that's a concern. Yes, I would like to see something. And if they don't use the money for the upgrade of the Pollen Street lights, then maybe some of that could be siphoned off. It's not a great sum of money, 65,000 or thereabouts. And you can replace all the lights, bring them up to date, and not have any more problems with them going forward. And it would make me happy. I didn't say that. Strike that off the record. Okay, any further comments? Right. Someone care to move the Thames Community Board receive the action schedule, report dated 7th of November 2024. Arms folded tells me that. Oh, shut up, I've gone. You're not even. Moved by Board Member Mackenzie. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Deputy Chair Rob Johnson. All in favour, please say aye. Those against, declared carried. Chairperson report, I'll take it as read. Someone care to move the motion? Well, that's a bit too quick. Board Member Rakwa. Okay, moved by Board Member Rakwa. Do we have a seconder, please? Yeah. Seconded by Councillor Rebel. Is there any comments? The more I was going to say salacious, I wasn't salacious. The more pointy comments I made and that were taken out. So and as well, probably wisely done so too. Okay, no, there'll be no questions. I propose put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, declared carried. So we're now going to move over the page. There we are. Right. Thank you. February 25th of yeah.
Secondary, we're good to go.
Where's the motion? Where's the actual wording for it? That's the. Oh yeah. Okay. And you say that's the motion.
It's the next one.
Oh, I see. You haven't got a motion for it. Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Sinclair. Do we have a seconder, please? Peter Rebel, Councillor Rebel. So all those in favour, please say aye. Those against, declared carried. So we've got to remove the public